Another part of this colonial mindset, um, and which is inherently in the American military and the political position, um, suggests that um, the, the Asian enemy can't be a human being, basically. Um, and so the Herr asks on page 113, they say, what about the complete fanaticism of attackers who are doped to the eyeballs? Sure, they smoke dope. It gets them crazy. This is at a time when it was thought that to smoke marijuana made people schizophrenic, something which was, excuse me, in itself not understood. Who ran pushing civilian shields forward, who chained themselves to their machine guns and died right there rather than fail, who had no regard for human life, on page 113. So this is Herr, basically calling the military out on its flat out racist assumptions about how fanatic the enemy is. They're just nuts. If you believe that the way you live is the best way in the world to live, then you have a duty, as far as you see it, to make sure everyone else lives that way too. And colonialism, then taking a country and making it into a lesser version of your own, but still some kind of reflection of yourself, can become imperialism. It may start out with what Rudyard Kipling, famous British writer who wrote the Just So stories and other books, which were enormously popular. Kim was very popular, called The White Man's Burden. So the idea is that it may start out as that you're going to a country which you create as a colony, basically because you want the raw materials they have and stuff like that. You want what they've got, but you also want to create a small version of yourself, a mini me. And the question then is that what role does this new you play in the global empire, basically? So the decision that the nation, in this case, the United States, which is now arguably the most powerful of the world forces, despite the nuclear club that has developed, the Americans really probably have the superior military, despite the fact that the Soviets have put everything they've got into the military and have bankrupted the country doing that. But as America now begins to try to design the world, it takes people's lives and cultures and wishes and moves on changing their values, their religions, their economic and education systems, and so on. And this is the winning of hearts and minds that Johnson is after. So it's much more dangerous in many ways than flat out killing people, although that's obviously that is also a crime. I mean, that is an atrocity. That is a war crime, because it's a genocide, basically. So the problem then seems to be that you've got an ethical, a bit of an ethical issue. If your Constitution says that you effectively won't treat anybody else, that you will treat everybody who's part of this deal, as if they have the right to behave the way they want to behave and so on, and that they have the right to choose politically what they wish to do and so on, and they don't have the right to be your dictator and all of that stuff. How is it that you can go to another country and behave this way? So the ethical problems start to raise themselves, and this is something which young people particularly, and pacifists, as I say, the Quakers particularly, and the Amish, any religious-based, well, many religious-based communities will look at it this way. On the other hand, if the idea is convert the heathen to your religion, then the religion may look favorably on such an invasion. So what this means is that the Americans begin to look at the whole planet as a colony. And it means that if spreading the good stuff is the idea, then, well, wouldn't you want to do that everywhere, basically? It also means giving oneself permission to do all kinds of bad things in the name of a larger good, where you got to bring about desirable changes. And if it just so happens that you have to kill a generation to do it, well, they'll thank us later, basically, is sort of the thinking. Now, as I say, this is not in any way new. This is what colonialism looks like. It's just that Americans don't think they're engaged in colonialism or imperialism, for that matter. So this is one of the places where we have to ask ourselves about what is ethical and what it is legitimate to do to other people who didn't ask for help and didn't ask to change, especially when one of them writes to you and says, would you help us make the kind of country that we would like to make? And the kind of country that Ho was designing would have looked much more like a participatory democracy than the kind of regime that Diem or any of his followers would actually construct. Okay, so that's the end of this first section.